Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's Q&A. I don't think there's too much this week, but what the heck? Let's jump in and see what we got. First up is Adam W. with two questions. First question is, how long would you guess until there's a Sega CD optical drive emulator or an FPGA replacement? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, never? Well, first and foremost, anytime you want something like that, you first want to look towards software emulation and see if it's done yet, which in the case of Sega CD, it's been done for a long time now. And as far as getting it running on real hardware or real optical drive emulator, people have been showing demos of that for a few years now. But getting something booting in a demo form and actually being able to drop a USB stick or something in place of it are two completely different things. So I would say within a year, just because there's so many different ways to go about that. But Sega CD is trickier than most, and that leads into your second question. Has anyone ever considered, or would anyone consider, converting Sega CD images into a flash cartridge bootable format, presumably stripping out CD music and elements that require the add-on chips? No, because of how ingrained the Sega CD hardware is in itself. The only two things that you would be able to do is, number one, just a straight up optical drive emulator. So, unplug the CD-ROM drive, plug in a USB stick or something, or an FPGA recreation of the entire Sega CD with all the chips. Either you might be able to create something much like the MSU1 audio for Super Nintendo that kind of fakes that process. So at the very least, you could have CD audio games or CD audio on Genesis games, but that would require, creating a whole new virtual chip. So I would hope that if people were thinking about that, they would put those efforts towards something else, towards actually either making the ODE or making the full FPGA or whatever. But there's been people, like I said, people have been showing these demoed for a while now. So I don't think 5 or 10 years. I would think within a year you'll see something. Phil Welker had a good question. He said he'd soldered together his own Genesis triple bypass board, which, good job, dude, those are not easy. And on the BOM, the bill of materials, two components say DNP. Google tells me that means do not place. I always thought it meant do not populate, but whatever, same thing. So does that mean do not place and you're done, or do not place and short the pads together? So that means don't touch it at all. And while we're trying to make things easier in the triple bypass version 2, there's still going to be a bit of confusion in that if you have one model, you would short together two pads and leave one untouched at all. For another one, you would short together three pads. So we're trying to find a happy medium. It's my personal opinion that having to short jumpers is a more straightforward way of dealing with it than do not populate. But I'm also looking at it from the perspective of I'm buying this pre-made and trying to install it in my own console. So from the perspective of somebody who's building their own, we probably should have good documentation together so that you'll know, well, if I'm only building two of these for Genesis 1s, I don't even need these components over here, and then in that case, you'd run into a bunch of other DNPs. So, yes, when it says do not place or do not populate, whichever is correct, don't put anything at all, just leave it floating, and that's it. And for the record, too, there's lots of cases where you would not want things floating, especially in the audio world. We've taken care of all of that. If it says DNP, that means that it's 100% safe, leave nothing in its place, make sure nothing's shorted, and you're done. But good question. Mackenzie Johnson has an interesting question. They said, I got a question about a NES RGB install. They just completed eTIM's version 1 RGB mod board in a NES front loader and have video issues where the top of the image is shaky. They've tried TTL versus 75 ohm. So that just means make sure what's coming out of the end of the cable, at the end of the SCART cable, is 75 ohm. So that's, just a little bit of clarification. That's what that part means. So if you're using like a SNES cable, you would want TTL, whereas if you're using just a pass-through cable, you'd want 75 ohm. That shouldn't affect your issue, but continuing along. Tried C-Sync and LumaSync and still getting the shaky image on the top of the screen. Also did a full recap and a 7.8 SO5 upgrade, and also used thicker cable for power and ground and 30 AWG from eTIM's board to the mini DIN also using eTIM's NES RGB cable. So don't know if that could be an issue either. You're going into an Ikegami HTM 1907. So the only thing I could think of is some RGB monitors are just weird. I could go into a long, boring technical explanation, but it ends in weird. The one that I love to use because it's so weird is the 9-inch DH series BVM, because if you could make something work on that, you could make it work on everything. So I've heard Ikegamis or Ikegamis have similar issues sometimes. So if you could try it on anything else, a capture card, a different monitor, anything, possibly even try composite video out just to see if you're getting issues then, that would be the first thing. If you're using Tim's cable, that's a pass-through cable, so definitely set it at 75 ohm. But I mean, to be honest, I would guess that that's not a direct sync voltage issue, because if it was, you'd probably have issues all over the screen, not just the shaky image at the top. So my only suggestion at this moment would be definitely try it on any other device, any other display, capture card, whatever, and then figure out what happens and go from there. And if it happens everywhere else, let's say you have a capture card and an OSSC or a FrameMeister or something, then you really just need to go back and start tracing out everything. And that's where things get really tricky. And this is where, and I'm not talking about your situation specifically, but this is why I always recommend, if people aren't 100% confident in what they're doing, at least consider an installer, because that's a problem that I constantly run into, where I'll go through a pretty advanced mod and I'll pull it off and it looks perfect. And I'll send it to my expert friends and they'll say, wow, it actually looks perfect, but something doesn't work. And that's the biggest difference between somebody that does this all the time, is if I gave that, my weird issue to Jose or to Zach, which I end up usually doing, they'll spend 10 minutes with it and go, oh yeah, it's the thing. And they know because they've already run into this problem a million times, whereas that's the first time I've done it. So my suggestion, number one, without a doubt, would be try any other kind of display or output source, and then just start talking to other people who have done the install and see if they've run into the same thing. And if you still don't get any progress, then I would definitely send it to an expert installer to have them troubleshoot, because I've just run into so many cases where everything looks flawless, and then a friend of mine will just go, oh yeah, the thing's backwards, and it's fixed. So start out with the easy one and then kind of go from there, and let me know if you need any help. Next, Kester Weeks said they bought Tanglewood from Good Old Games so they could play it on their Mega SG. So if you buy the software version of Tanglewood, you get the official ROM for it for free. So even if you don't even play it on your PC, same thing with Steam, that's an official way of just buying the ROM. But anyway, is there a list somewhere of more new Genesis games with legitimate ways to purchase? I think that the ROM purchase option is a great model. Me too, big time. I can't tell you how much I love that, because the thing that I always recommend that software devs do is give a demo of something, whatever's the right fit for the game, the first level, the first whatever, but a way that people could play it and either go, oh, this looks cool, but it's not for me, or I have to have it. And then also sell both physical copies and ROMs. And I genuinely think that the retro gaming community will support, if they can, as you will and as I have. So that's a great method of looking at things. My best recommendation to you, if you want to look at more games like that, is go to Retro RGB, find a post by Ray Commend, and then if you click on his name, it shows you all of Ray's posts, and then just scroll through all of those, because Ray is, he absolutely has his finger on the button of all the new Genesis games coming out and completely knows which ones are worth looking at. So just looking at his posts on the site is probably the best guide I could ever offer onto what are the newer Genesis games that follow that same model. And if anybody happens to be watching this that is a dev, please remember that. Please remember how many people really do want to support you, but maybe for whatever reason don't want or can't buy a full physical copy, but would love to support just the ROM. For me, I don't have the space for it. From the other side of things, I know a lot of people that make their own cartridges, and it's hard. It is really hard to get a good quality cartridge that you could sell to people and confidently say, it's built correctly, hard gold, it's properly beveled. So, even from a dev point of view, offering a ROM is always a good thing, at least in my opinion. So, good question, but yeah, check out Ray's posts and you should be able to get a long list of good games that are either available now or are about to be available that will allow you to just buy the ROM. One thing from Brento, which was posted in a different place than inside the Q&As, I got an email notification. So just for the next time, please post inside the Q&As for these. But Brento posted, beware extra lag on Samsung game mode defaults. He learned that if he turned on the Samsung's game mode on his new TV, it would automatically be set to Game Motion Plus, which has an interpolation feature. Once he turned it off, it went from 20 to 15 milliseconds of lag. And that's something that I've always mentioned in conjunction with the TCLs, but I think it should be known as like a general rule where anytime you have a new flat screen TV and whatever input is going into game mode, you should turn everything off. Turn it into game mode, or switch it to game mode, and then turn every feature off. And also pay attention for different resolutions. So if you pump in 1080p 60 and turn everything off, and then you go to put in like the Nintendo AVS from Retro USB at 720p, check all the settings again, because some TVs not only have settings per input, but they have settings per resolution per input. But good catch, Brento, and thank you for sharing. And since there wasn't too many Q&A questions this week, there were a few cool things in the room tour video, a few comments, so I figured I would just talk about those. One, Dave Phipps, I could never live in New York City. I think my bedroom is bigger than your entire apartment. Probably. Jealous of that LG OLED. Thank you very much. I was just in the right place at the right time for that, so I was able to get a super good deal. But the real question, do you have the Oppo UDP-203? I'm thinking of selling mine because they sell more used than they did new. I do have it. I don't think I would ever sell it because it has the ability to play back media pretty much one-to-one. So very often with things like a Raspberry Pi and 3D Blu-rays, you'll get 99% perfect. I mean, that's actually a really great solution. But Cousin Scott and I have done a test, and we didn't end up making it into a video because it would have taken weeks. So, but we just did a test for our own fun, and watching any kind of media you could imagine on that was better on the Oppo than any other source we found. Now, I'd spoken to a few people before that had technical reasons why I should try other devices. I just don't have the money to buy like 4 others and, you know, keep trying. So I would hold on to it if you use it. The only thing is, there used to be a mod you could do that hacks it to play ISOs over the network. Somebody named Wrong, R-O-N-G, was giving that away for free, and then Wrong kind of disappeared. And all of a sudden, there's people on eBay selling that firmware for $250 for firmware, for technically illegal hacking firmware. It really makes me want to rage out, to be honest with you. I have the firmware Wrong sent me a year and a half ago. I had the wrong programmer, and I kind of gave up because I didn't want to keep bothering the guy because he gave it to me for free. So it was actually Steve from HD Retrovision pointed me in the direction of the correct programmer. The programming went fine, but the file wasn't the right one. So I didn't know what was going on. That's when I kind of went to look on eBay to find them. So if anybody out there does have that firmware, please let me know. I would love to sneak that out on the internet somewhere to shut these people down from stealing $250 from you. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but the only way I see it is somebody provided something for free and somebody else took it and is selling it for $250. So I do understand there's a service behind it. They're offering to help walk you through it, but I don't know about that. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So, I mean, hold on to it if you can. If not, if you want to make a buck, sure. But at the moment, as far as I know, that's still by far the best disc player. And the only thing it falls short on is there was one other Oppo player that does deinterlacing of DVDs slightly better. So if you're, believe it or not, if you're predominantly a DVD watcher, you should actually have both. You get the DVD player for DVDs, output that into the HDMI input of the UDP-203, and then let that do the scaling to 4K. So It was kind of complicated and nothing to do with retro gaming, but since you mentioned it, I figured I'd talk about it because it's, I love that stuff too, and I really want to make sure that the rare times that I set aside to get the disc, get the actual 4K disc and try to have the best experience, or whatever media I want to watch. I try to preview all the content that I make locally, and sometimes the best way to do that is through the Oppo. So I just want to always have the best way to play back my favorite movies, and at the moment that still seems to be it as far as I've tested, but hopefully there's better other solutions coming soon. Two pretty neat comments from Jason Jackson in the room tour video. First, he was curious about which PSU was in my PC. Well, the short version is it was in there when I got it. I'll tell that story if you really want to know. It involves a hedge fund and computers and stuff. But Jason said that I bet your system at full load doesn't draw more than 250 watts. Well, I don't think it draws 1200 watts, but there's a full math formula that basically says heat to efficiency based on load. And you're right in that PSUs run less efficiently at 10 to 20% than 50%, but also don't forget that my average PC use, so 90% of the time, let's say, is this, recording some videos. My CPU usage is at 5.1%. My GPU usage is probably at like 20% or something. However, when I start encoding 4K video, everything about this thing maxes. Everything. To the point where very often I have to stick a fan next to the open sides of it in order to keep it cool. So, I'm actually very curious about that as well, and I would kind of like to see what Renee has to say about that, so maybe I'll bring that up in the Retro Roundtable. And also, you pointed out that when I said one of those APC power supplies, what I really mean is a line conditioner with automatic voltage regulator. So, yes, exactly. I have those on the D32 cart, which I showed in the video, as well as on my main TV setup with my OLED TV, and I think the Oppo are the only two things plugged into that. Or maybe I have another power strip as well, but the purpose of that is, yes, to send constant and clean power. And in the Retro Roundtable, we had a long discussion one day about that, and Renee suggested those over something like a battery backup, because that'll keep voltage constant, even with things like quick brownouts. Whereas, which I used to get in Stamford, Connecticut, I mean, minimum 10 times a week. It would drive me nuts, too. I had UPSs on everything. So he actually recommended that over a UPS in those setups for efficiency reasons as well as consistency of power signal. Because I guess with UPSs, if you want to get that just as good as something like a line conditioner, you have to buy a really expensive one. You essentially have to buy a line conditioner with a battery backup built in. So I thought both of those points were pretty cool and just wanted to respond. So thanks, Jason. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much for participating. I don't care if there's 2 or 20 questions. I always try to get to them all, and I always really enjoy it. And just a quick note to anybody new for these things. Any question you have, whatever you feel like asking, just post it wherever you found this video, or at least the newest Q&A. So I always turn off the comments on YouTube, and I always just leave this as a supporter experience. And then about a month later, I make them public just as a courtesy. But this is really about all of you. So any questions at all, just post in the latest Q&A video underneath wherever you found it. Patreon, Bitbacker, Subscribestar, YouTube, whatever. I don't really care which one anybody uses. I'm just very appreciative. So thank you very much, and I'll see you all next time.